In this video, I'm just going to run through how I create some very simple backgrounds for my Zentangle and Doodle designs, and hopefully it will give you a starting point for your own. So the equipment that I recommend that you get is a sketchbook. Now I like to use an A4 sketchbook, but if you think that's a little bit daunting, then do pick up an A5 sketchbook. I did used to use A5 sketchbooks when I started out, and I can highly recommend it because it means that you can fill in a small area and really just start to get your confidence in what you're doing. But originally I started with some book pages and old scraps of paper that I had lying around in notebooks, and yeah, you can use anything really, any piece of paper that you want. I do now prefer cartridge paper and watercolour paper, very thin watercolour paper. I like to have a ruler handy and marker pens. These are just cheapo ones, they're not Sharpies. I did start out using Sharpies, but the cheaper ones lasted just as long and they're perfectly fine in my sketchbook. And black gel pens. Now these black gel pens are just the handwriting style pens. I have picked up other types of gel pens and ink pens over the last 15-16 months, and these ones are my favourite. They're just a handwriting pen with permanent ink. For the colour, now you don't need to have colour. If you haven't got colour, don't worry about it. You can still start doodling and pick up some colours later if you choose to carry on with it. Most of my designs only have 2 to 3 colours, some of them only have 1. So you don't need a huge range of colours to start. She says that as she pulls out a whole range of colours. These are just coloured gel pens. You can pick these up in the stationery section of most shops that sell that kind of thing. You could also use coloured markers, although I do find that these tend to bleed into the cartridge paper quite a lot. But if you're using a different sort of paper, then they might work really well for you. You can also use acrylic paint, watercolour paint, or drawing inks. But like I said, you don't need to go out and buy lots and lots of fancy equipment. The cheap basic range will do, and 1 or 2 colours in your favourite colours, why not? Most of my backgrounds are either based on the neurographic technique or just a series of lines. Now I say based on the neurographic technique because technically it's not always purely neurographic. I just want to make sure that's clear. I do like to draw a border around just so I don't keep going off the edge of the page. So for the basic neurographic background, I'm just going to draw some lines across the page. A little bit wiggly and completely random at this stage. I'm just using a black marker pen. Two from the side, 2 from the top, and then I like to just do a couple of curves at the edges as well. Don't worry if you go over lines, and don't worry if there's little gaps like this. And then what I'll do is I'll look to see where the biggest spaces are, and I'll just draw a random line just to kind of break up these bigger sections into smaller sections. So I'm just going to draw a few more just to show you that they can just be completely random. So at this stage I don't really think about what I'm trying to achieve, not normally anyway, not unless I'm trying to recreate a picture that I've already done. And sometimes I'll do little lines like so, and sometimes I'll do big, long, sweeping, winding, wiggly lines. It doesn't even matter if you get kinks in them. We're just putting anything down on paper, and it can be quite random and quite just a nice scribbly little exercise really. It takes away the feeling of, I don't know what to draw. Just scribble, just scribble. You can also draw your lines in sweeping curves across the page, or even straight lines if you prefer. And these will create a very different overall end result. And sometimes I'll just draw the lines across the page without any crossovers. Well, almost. So one of the other ways that I create backgrounds is by using some circles on the page. Now what I like to do is use the inside of a roll of tape. I've got various different sizes here that I just like to keep hold of and keep handy. And what I'll do is I'll just draw a series of circles. Sometimes I'll have them interlocking. And sometimes I will have them separate. And it's quite fun sometimes to put some different sizes in. I find that using the inside of a roll of tape is a lot easier than drawing around the outside of something. But if you haven't got a roll of tape to hand, you can use an old tin or jar and draw around it. But you do get a much smoother result using the inner of a roll of tape. And as with the neurographic backgrounds, if I was just leaving the circles on the page, I'd probably round off all the edges as well. But I don't always do that, and I'm really not telling you what to do. This is just to give you a bit of inspiration. Sometimes when I've got my circles like this, I will also add some additional lines to the page. And yeah, I try to either intersect them, like so, or go around them. As I keep saying, there's no rules. Just put something down on the page and then plan to use that for your doodles. One of the other methods that I like to use is to just draw some random circles on the page. And these are freehand circles, and they're not perfect. But they really don't have to be. These bits where they don't quite join here, we can join them up when we come down to fine-tuning the design. And then sometimes I'll just fill the edges in with some half circles or quarter circles. And I'll use a combination of a marker pen and a gel pen. And all I do is, within all of these circles, is draw more circles. And I don't mind if some bits are thicker and some bits are thinner. And sometimes I'll leave a big gap and just draw a small circle or a small shape inside. These might look a little bit rough, but the end result is usually very effective. This technique is exactly the same technique as I've used on these pictures. So it might look a little bit rough to start with, but the end result, hopefully, will be much prettier than this rough result. But the whole point of the exercise is just to give us some shapes that we can then doodle in. Sometimes when I've got these circles on the page, I'll then draw around them and fill in all the space with more shapes. Once we've done our basic background, with the ones that are neurographic or have crossing over lines, I like to curve off all the corners in the neurographic style. Basically, all you need to do is round off all of the edges where the lines meet. And I simply do that by drawing one to the other, one to the other, one to the other, and one to the other, and then I fill it in. Sometimes I do these just, on their own, and sometimes I'll do them like this. It's a very relaxing process, and don't rush it. Take your time and just focus on what you're doing at the time rather than trying to think about the big picture. Right, so I'll try and show you with a bit of close-up how I fill in the corners. I'll normally start about 1 centimetre up the line on a wide curve. Just bring it down to smooth it out. And on a short curve, that's just under 1 centimetre. Now there's no hard and fast rule on how to put the curves in. You can take them quite deep, like so, or you can take them very shallow, like so. Just go with what feels right, and then fill them in. And smooth them off so you've got a nice rounded finish. And what you want to do is just continue doing that until you've filled in all of the edges. I just thought I'd better quickly mention that if you go a bit wrong, like I've gone a little bit wrong here, it's not quite a nice curve, it doesn't matter. If you find that you've drawn your line and you've gone a bit wibbly, like so, just smooth it out and fill in the corner. This kind of art is very forgiving, and as a beginner, forgiving is good, I think. There's no pressure, there's no stress, you're just putting some marks down on the page. There's no right or wrong way. Doesn't matter if something looks a bit odd, we'll just work with it. Take your time and enjoy the solitude of it and the calm, really. Things are too busy these days that we often forget to slow down, and slowing down is quite important, and perhaps that's one of the biggest things that I get out of doing this, is that it slows me down. So those are just a few ways that I create my background in my sketchbook. I'd just like to reiterate that there's no right or wrong way to do this. What I would like to do is to just encourage you to play around and find which shapes and patterns that you prefer. So in the rest of this series, I'll be showing you my true beginner tips with some super easy doodles to get you started. So do check out the rest of the playlist. I'll be continuing to add a few more videos of really super easy doodle designs that you can use to fill in all of these shapes. I'm no expert, but I am an expert at being a beginner, and these are the things that I've learned as a beginner, which I hope might help you too. Do give me a thumbs up if you found this video useful, and don't forget to subscribe if you would like to see more.